stories and sharing love. Let us draw strength from your love. Let us be guided by your Spirit. And let us be surrounded by your grace. Amen. When we get to the time of sharing, I'm going to suggest if you are able to get up and walk up to the table and light a candle, that you feel free to do that. And then that will be an opportunity then, or a signal that you have a story to share. And there are a few more candles than there are those of us here. So if you want to share more than once, feel free, and don't let the candles stop you either. And probably the easiest way to do it is to...
we don't smoke anymore. So
I know, that's the problem. Nobody has there is one candle burning, so if you just dip the wick into the flame and then... So we'll start with a little bit of scripture, a very familiar passage from Ecclesiastes, where the prophet writes, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones, and a time to gather them. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search, and a time to give up. A time to keep, and a time to throw away. A time to tear, and a time to mend. A time to be silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time for war, and a time for peace." Well, it is good to be here together, and it is good to have an opportunity to share stories in a sacred time, really. Ideologies, different faith traditions, and certainly different experiences of God in our lives. And so as I was thinking about what might be helpful as a sort of focal point, what came to mind was this little barrel of monkeys. You remember these? These funny little monkeys? And I actually was so pleased. I ran out last night and was able to find these. Thank goodness for Fred Meyer. Because they are, at least for me, a good little reminder of one of the reasons that we're here today, which is our connections, our connectedness. We certainly are connected as family, but even beyond that, we are connected because of Shari, and because of our admiration for her, our love for her, and our appreciation for the ways that she impacted each of our lives. Now, the thing about these little monkeys is just one monkey all by itself is no big deal, right? It's pretty hard to have any fun with just one monkey. But it is when you begin to string them together, when they are connected to each other, that the fun begins. And it is not always easy to keep them connected. It can be difficult because sometimes you might push a little too hard on them and maybe a monkey breaks. If you're trying to force the connection, it doesn't work so well. Or sometimes you might forget about your monkeys and inadvertently sweep them off the table, and they may be lost. So not paying attention to the connection is also a bit of a problem. And likewise, as we think about our connections, you begin to see the similarities, right? sometime as family, we may try to force a connection, which doesn't necessarily work. Likewise, if we forget about our family connections, it's difficult to keep them strong. The thing about Shari that I really appreciated was that she understood all about connections. And she, I think, was one of those rare people who really paid attention to them in ways that enabled them to become stronger. She knew how to keep things and people together. How many times did Shari put together the Munson Family Directory? And every time that, it was time for a new one, it was usually Shari that was calling or emailing and saying, is this the current information? Likewise, how many times when someone in the family had a particular need for prayer, was it Shari who sent out that word and made sure that everybody knew that there was a need that we could attend to? Well, some of you are old enough to remember that way back in the 19... I don't remember the rest of it.
And the season.
And a time for every purpose under heaven.